Richard Serra once said, "If you reduce sculpture to the flat plane of the photograph, you're denying the temporal experience, the real content of the work." This explains why the primary tools for interpreting Serra's sculpture are theories of embodied experience. It also explains why this photo of Serra's The Matter of Time can serve only as a virtual marker of the experience of walking through his Guggenheim installation in Bilbao, Spain. But there is an alternative. Immanuel Kant's aesthetic theory, which reinvents the sublime and the beautiful, better engages what materializes within the walls of the matter of time. And while Kant's theories can be fruitfully critiqued and extended, I suggest, for example, the body's active role in the process of thinking, his aesthetic theory withstands the passage of 220 years. Kant grapples with the aesthetic moment's most confusing trait, the desire of the assertion, "this is sublime," or "this is beautiful," to universalize a subjective feeling. In this way, Kant touches the heart of the human condition, to be joined with others, but to experience profound separation. This insight transports the aesthetic into the realm of the interpersonal, and thereby the political and the ethical, which is where we need it to be. In the 350 by 75-foot Guggenheim Gallery, Serra lays out 8 sculptures, all of which he considers elements of a single larger work. These elements, named using labels such as ellipse and spiral, inhabit the gallery as a village. As I walk through, however, I inhabit them and they inhabit me. I approach number 7, Between the Torus and the Sphere. Each of its 8 steel plates is a section of the surface of either a sphere or the area that faces the whole of a donut. All you need to know about geometry, however, is that the spheric sections are familiar and predictable, while the torus sections counter intuition. The resulting passages, concave and convex, torque not only my body, not only the material of the steel, but also my body and my psyche. I enter between the torus and the sphere as I might enter a cave, warily. How could it be that the steel plates of this passage are centered enough to stand? This is the first inkling of Kant's sublime feeling, which is not, as it is sometimes characterized, a more intense experience of beauty. Kant's sublime is the aesthetic pleasure, but first displeasure, that arises in the presence of something that appears infinite in size or power, the immense mountain, the mighty ocean. To describe his radical ideas, Kant created a new language, and his terms, imagination, understanding, and reason, have meanings different both from his 18th century and our 21st century usages. Kant says, imagination is the capacity we all have to represent our sensory perceptions in our minds, giving in this way mental form to these sensations. The displeasure of the sublime arises when imagination attempts to formulate in the mind the sensation of an object's oversized magnitude or might, but fails to grasp this particular object's formlessness. Neither infinitely large nor powerful, between the torus and the sphere nonetheless appears boundless in both. As I walk down this passage, the sculpture masks the endpoint of its magnitude in the unpredictability of its path and obscures the endpoint of its might in the paradoxical, impossible, unstable stability of its plates. In response, what Kant calls understanding, the capacity to apply a concept to a representation, has no form to work with. It cannot help the mind name, thus comprehend, this boundless experience. A 10-year-old girl emerges from one of the sculptures saying, "You never know what's coming next." Not knowing, a property of all the matter of time elements, also evokes the infinite. To know something is not only to limit it to a finite definition of what it is, but also to eliminate the infinite definitions of what it is not. Just as Serra's sculpture obscure the endpoint of their magnitude and their might, they also obscure the endpoint of my capacity to know. So displeasure here arises as a towering passage that wrestles my agency from me, hides its origin and the logic of its mass and trajectory, and thereby stumps my mind's capacity to represent it as a unified object. Yet the 10-year-old girl ends her comment not with ugh, but with cool. Where is her pleasure in this entirely disturbing moment? Kant says, I must be safe in order to experience the danger fundamental to the sublime. If I were literally endangered, for instance, witnessing an exploding volcano, I would flee. Yet there is something ungraspable about Kant's undangerous danger. Safety arises not out of my comprehension of this boundless object, but out of my comprehension of myself, out of my recognition of my capacity to reason. Kant's reason is simply this: thinking's capacity to conceive ideas. Kant's ideas are thoughts independent of the experience the world gives the mind, deductions from within the mind. It is this narrowly defined reason that leads both to a sense of safety and to pleasure. If the sublime's displeasure arises from my imagination's incapacity to represent in my mind the various infinities of the matter of time, the sublime's pleasure arises from my reason's capacity to conceive of the idea of infinity. In this way, I find a boundary to contain the matter of time within myself. I start again. I approach between the torus and the sphere, but now instead of moving with the plate, I rest. The play of light reveals to me a scene similar to the one I see in this Claude Monet water lily painting. Here in steel is a layering of shadow and light, color and brushstroke, streaking, striating, etching, and blurring in orange, rust, olive, black, and gray. It doesn't matter that the patina results from unpredictable weathering, nor that, as Serra asserts, quote, I wasn't particularly concerned with what the skin looked like, nor that art historical analyses don't seem to address the surface of Serra's work or perform a systematic analysis of their beauty. What matters is that I experience more than space bounded by the steel skin. I experience, bound within the surface of the skin, images that initiate the dynamic that leads to the declaration, this is beautiful. I find dozens of instances of this beautiful. A blaze of orange streaks across double-torqued ellipse. Dark brown stripes punctuate the rust fields of torque spiral right-left. Engulfing walls in blind spot reversed striate golden against black. The sweeping edge of snake, which evokes the sublime feeling when I experience its precariousness, evokes the beautiful when my mind reduces this part of the sculpture to a single frame. In Kantian terms, I call an object beautiful when imagination and understanding engage in what Kant calls an open-ended, quote-unquote, free play. This open-endedness is neither fragmented nor formless. Imagine always represents the object to me as unified. But understanding doesn't define this representation with a particular concept, spiral or steel, for instance. Instead, with every iteration of the free play, the mind affirms the object to be defined simply as beautiful. In some ways, Serra has created works that are inaccessible to the sedentary viewer. When I am moving, the Serra sculpture disorients, disturbs, confounds not only the form-making capacity of my imagination, but also my agency as a participant. Yet as I walk into and about the sculptures, the forms call upon me to pause. In the stillness of contemplation, I no longer experience bulges and hollows, layerings of shadow, and carvings out of space as the activities of a physical force upon me. My imagination steals agency back from the sculpture. It focuses not on the unbounded space and time that the sculpture compels me to endure, but on the bounded space and time that unfolds within the panels themselves. In this way, in movement and pause, in the sublime and the beautiful, the elements of the matter of time have the capacity to lead double lives and to double the lives of their participants. Neither Kant nor I seek to catalog rules for all aesthetic moments. Moving will not always evoke the sublime, and pausing or framing will not always evoke the beautiful. I seek only to notice how these two aesthetic experiences manifest in this particular installation. Yet Kant does identify certain attributes he says are common to all aesthetic judgments. Most compelling is this. Kant says that implicit in the phrase, "this is sublime" or "this is beautiful," is the assertion that everyone else ought to agree. As if in asserting sublimity or beauty, a person were observing qualities like orange color or large size that were inherent in the object. But Kant says these are not inherent. There are no objective criteria to prove sublimity or beauty in the way that wavelength or measurement prove color or size. If you resist this overreaching judgment, then you are encountering what I call Kant's subjective universal paradox. Kant is telling us what we are all too embarrassed to say to ourselves, that the context of allegedly universal judgments is actually subjective, and the context of allegedly subjective ones is actually universal. This, the underlying nature of all judgment, is for me the most powerful disclosure of the aesthetic experience. And in Richard Serra's The Matter of Time, which inspires a surge of aesthetic judgments, the revelation is unavoidable. Thank you.